And so the opportunity here is to hear a lot of work that has been done recently through all different sources combined, and that Rusty has been able to also pull together. And so I want to introduce him and have him take away his presentation. There will be visuals and slides and things you can see from there, from his presentation. So Rusty, would you start and tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, and then go forth and what you are planning? You got to unmute.
Sorry. I'm going to share my screen in a moment because I do have a presentation that I think helps illustrate the significance of what Bishops Lodge is doing and brings into focus in a comprehensive way what the challenges are that it's creating for us. But before I get started, let me just introduce myself. I'm a new resident in Tesuque. My wife and I moved here at the end of March, and I thought I should subscribe to the local paper. It took me a couple of weeks to get delivery started, but once the first paper arrived, on page 4 of the very first issue I got, I noticed at the bottom this little obscure notice about my upstream neighbor, Bishops Lodge, had applied with NMED for a new groundwater discharge permit. And I thought, gee, I came here because we're right on the river and I really like the riparian setting I'm in. I'm wondering what's going on here. Are they planning on dumping in the river? And I asked a friend in town who's pretty well connected if he knew anything about it. He said, no, he didn't know about it, but he'd look into it and came back and said, oh, no, don't worry. They're not going to dump in the river. That's the last thing they're going to do. And then I pursued it a little bit with the state, and they put me in touch with EPA, and EPA told me, oh, yeah, they have an application into discharge to the river, and got the application, and things got started from there. What piqued my curiosity was, for about 6 years early in my career, I'm an attorney. And early in my career, the litigation I did was primarily environmental groundwater litigation, dealing with very severely contaminated groundwater sites in California that were impacting municipal and private wells, and worked extensively with a number of really renowned hydrogeologists to try and adjust the problem. I'm not going to claim any competency or expertise, but I have familiarity, and I have a pretty sound working knowledge of what's going on here, and I just want to share that with you. I vetted this with some friends who are hydrogeologists. They haven't looked at the data, and somebody desperately needs to right away, which we're going to talk about near the end of this. But I just want to share with you what is a relatively informed, but perhaps not completely accurate, because we don't have all the information, but a relatively informed picture of just what's going on here. So I'm going to start, see if I can get this up. And I don't know if I can get rid of the subtitles aren't currently available, because that's supposed to go away. I'm going to start about Protect Tesuque. There we go. Protect Tesuque was formed this summer. It's a New Mexico nonprofit public interest corporation, and it has 3 overriding objectives. The first objective was to prevent Bishops Lodge from dumping partially treated sewage in the Little Tesuque Creek. And up until, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we thought we had done a pretty good job accomplishing that. But perhaps not. The second objective was to get Bishops Lodge to implement an environmentally sound solution for disposal of its sewage. Okay, don't dump in the creek. That's a no-brainer. But that doesn't mean you get carte blanche to do whatever you want with this municipal waste stream you've created up there. You need to adopt an environmentally sound solution for it. And the third, and perhaps the most important objective that Protect Tesuque identified, was to get the county to adopt and enforce sewage and waste disposal regulations to protect Tesuque Basin's drinking water acequia as an ecosystem. How this has gotten as far as it's gotten, and with so little oversight or regulation, is a real serious problem for all of us who live here. And if we want to protect our ecosystem, if we want to protect our water rights, our aquifer, our drinking water, our health, we need to take this seriously and get engaged, because the county isn't, and no one else is. And if we don't do it, it ain't going to happen. So let's start with Bishops Lodge. What I have here is from the Amot settlement. It's a 3D rendering shot over Bishops Lodge, showing some of the wells around Bishops Lodge, but it's focused largely on Bishops Lodge. And you see here Bishops Lodge Road, and this is the Little Tesuque Creek. The Little Tesuque runs out of Hyde State Park and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains beyond. It has a very steep gradient, drops down, as you can see here, if you can follow my cursor. It drops down along the southern edge of Bishops Lodge property. These are all steep hills that form a gradient down into this ravine. And then it comes along, follows this drainage down, crosses Bishops Lodge Road, and ultimately joins the Rio Tesuque, the big Tesuque Creek, further downstream. So what are we looking at here? Well, this is Bishops Lodge right here. This is where the lodge is. And here, up in the hills behind the lodge, are the hills and villas. This is the real estate development that the owners of the lodge sold off this land, and now we have a small, not so small, residential development back here, 80 plus residences. And what the plans are for further development, we simply don't know. Maybe someone on this call does, but we're having difficulty getting clarity about where this is all going. So you've got a relatively large community here, and this community is straddled on the highlands, and their occupation slopes down to the Little Tesuque. The Little Tesuque is the lowest point of anything you see here on the map. It's a drainage, and it collects from both sides of the Little Tesuque, and water flows to it. And in this little community, there are over 1,000 people a day contributing to the waste stream that Bishops Lodge is now managing. And we're going to look at how they have and what they are proposing to do going forward. So here's a little bit of a close-up. We've zeroed in here on the lodge. You can't now see any more of the villas and the hills up above. Here is the Little Tesuque running through the lodge. Here's Bishops Lodge Road. And what you see here are two old leach fields. These were the original leach fields for the lodge, right on Bishops Lodge Road, somewhat set back from the Little Tesuque, but not by much, basically in the horse paddocks. And the one on top was the oldest leach field. When the lodge expanded and added its residential development and quite a bit more demand, it built a new leach field here with supposedly state-of-the-art septic to handle that demand. So the plan was originally, we're going to take care of this whole community through septic on leach fields. This leach field, according to the lodge, failed almost immediately. The state-of-the-art septic system that was put in 2019 failed, and they have had an enormous waste disposal problem ever since. So to address that waste disposal problem, they decided that what they would do is build a treatment plant located right here, and take that partially treated water and dump it into the Little Tesuque. That's what they were proposing to do as of last June, and seeking an EPA permit to release the effluent into the Little Tesuque. There was a hue and cry within the community. I'm a new resident here, but I'll tell you, I was really impressed and very proud of this community for stepping up so firmly and quickly and uniformly to protest this. Not just getting out in the street, not just circulating mailings, not just reaching out to the media, but putting together a really sound legal strategy and an environmental strategy to deal with this. It was so effective that the lodge, I think, very quickly understood it was on the wrong side of this. It was in an intractably bad position, and they had to, as they called it, pivot. So what did they pivot to? Well, they're not going to dump their effluent into the Little Tesuque. That's what they said. No, we're going to build a new leach field right on the Little Tesuque, and we'll dump it there. We'll just put it on a leach field that is immediately adjacent to the Little Tesuque, situated in alluvial soils that are highly transmissive, with a water table 8 feet to 12 feet below during the snow melt. And we'll dump 30,000 gallons of partially treated effluent right there. So one question is, how stupid do they think we are? Bishops Lodge has water rights that allow it to draw 28 acre-feet of water out of the Little Tesuque. They draw their water up here, well upstream from their leach field. So they're not going to be impacted by this leach field. And they have drinking wells that allow them, and irrigation wells that allow them to extract groundwater. And those wells are located here. This is where those wells are located. And the leach field is here, immediately adjacent to the Little Tesuque. So what do we make of this? Well, the plan that the lodge has is they're going to collect all of the sewage and all the wastewater from 1,000+ people who are situated residentially anywhere from 100 to 700 feet in elevation above this area. They're going to pipe all of that sewage to their treatment plant, and then they're going to partially treat that effluent. We'll get to that in a minute. And they're going to discharge up to 30,000 gallons per day, every day, and it's unclear whether it's 4 months a year or 8 months a year. Looks like the permit says 8 months a year. Into a single 2,500 square foot leach field. In other words, a 50 by 50 foot leach field. That's the size of it. If you want to see it, just drive over to the lodge, turn in the main gate, and it's under construction right now, right on the Little Tesuque, right on the bank of the Little Tesuque. Then their plan is to expand this leach field to 5,000 square feet, in other words, double the size of it, and discharge 60,000 gallons per day in a phase 2. They keep that always in the footnotes, but it's always there. Where are they doing this? Well, let's go back and look at the leach field. This is a highly vulnerable, hazardous location to build a leach field. It's within a FEMA flood zone. Who builds leach fields in a flood zone? It's immediately adjacent to Little Tesuque Creek. They've made it even closer than their prior leach fields. Put it right next to it. It's on highly transmissive alluvial soils. This whole basin along this creek is nothing but wash coming out of the mountains. These are highly transmissive soils. They are not retentive soils. And the groundwater is 8 to 12 feet below the surface during the winter and spring snow melt. That is a very shallow water table. There's very little soil between the surface of the leach field and the groundwater, as you'll soon see. And if that's not bad enough, there are hundreds of drinking wells downstream. Doesn't sound like a prime place to put a leach field, especially one that's serving 1,000 people. What hazard does the lodge's proposed plan pose to the environment and surrounding neighbors? This is a composite picture I assembled from the Office of State Engineers website, interactive website that's maintained to show the location and provide data for every well that is recorded with the state engineer. I discovered it's incomplete. My 2 wells aren't on here. They're recorded with the state engineer and have been for 50 years, but they're not on his map. However, there are hundreds of wells that are on his map, and they're all documented, they're all recorded, and every one of these little white dots here you see, sorry, go back. Every one of these is a well.
The video, or did just me? I lost the video. Is everybody else still seeing it?
I see it.
Oh, okay, I'll fix it here. Sorry.
It's every one of these is a well. Some of these are 2 wells. Every one of these wells has water rights attached to it. And every one of these wells is dependent upon every other property owner here maintaining the quality and protecting the quality of the water they're drawing out of those wells. So at the top of this basin, and this is the very top of this basin, this is where the Little Tesuque comes right out of Hyde Park, of Hyde State Park, and flows downhill through Tesuque all the way along Bishops Lodge Road. So what hazard does this pose to those wells? And that's what we're going to look at a little bit. Bishops Lodge permit application provides no soils and no hydrogeologic testing to establish the rate or the extent to which contaminants will be released from the leach field to the surrounding soils, the underlying aquifer, or the creek. There's nothing. It provides no competent empirical assessment of the long-term impacts on down gradient aquifers and wells. Now, from my experience, I can tell you, 30 years ago, this was just basic soil science and hydrogeology. You look at and you calculate and you model what's the rate at which this is going to percolate through the leach field, how long before it reaches the aquifer, how much of it's going to hit that aquifer, what's the gradient of the groundwater when you get to that aquifer, and how fast is a plume going to spread through there. Now, science isn't perfect. This is all estimates, and figuring that out can be costly because it requires good empirical data. But there is nothing in the lodge's application to address that. Yet there are hundreds of drinking wells downstream. And there's no mechanism whatsoever to protect the creek, the underlying aquifers, or the down gradient drinking wells against long-term contamination. If you don't pay attention, you're just going to get it. Discharging so much effluent, 30,000 gallons a day, in such a small leach field is a very bad idea, prone to fail. Let's forget about all the downstream wells for a minute. Let's forget about the creek right next door. Let's forget about the groundwater table being just 8 feet below it. Just think about a 50 by 50 foot leach field into which you're going to dump 30,000 gallons a day, collecting all of the waste from 1,000 different people. This is a very bad idea, a very bad way to dispose of sewage and even partially treated sewage and wastewater, and it's highly prone to failure. During the snow melt, the leach field has only 20 to 30,000 feet of soil above the water table. A 2,500 square foot leach field with a water table 8 foot to 12 feet below means there's 20 to 30,000 cubic feet of soil between the leach field and the water table. That's how much soil there is there to sift and filter and absorb this 30,000 gallon per day discharge. Discharging 30,000 gallons per day comes to 210,000 gallons a week and 900,000 gallons, 3 acre feet of water a month. And this is going to go on day after day, week after week, month after month. But you know what? As the water increases, the amount of soil stays the same. It never increases. It's only 20 to 30,000 cubic feet, saturated over and over and over again. The same 20 to 30,000 cubic feet. How long do you think that 20 to 30,000 cubic feet is going to sit there and take all that water? Well, this is what it looks like. Daily, approximately 1.2 gallons per every cubic foot is discharged into the leach field. So every cubic foot is going to get 1.2 gallons of effluent. Weekly, it turns out to be 8.4 gallons of effluent for every cubic foot. And monthly, it's 36 gallons of effluent for every cubic foot. Now you go out in your yard and you saturate your soils like that for a month and look at what you got. And put this next to a creek, 8 feet above aquifers. So where will the lodge's effluent go? If it's going to, if they're going to put that much water over and over and over again into this little box of soil, where's all the water going to go? So I want you to just consider 2 points on the map here. This is the intersection of Bishops Lodge Road and Big Tesuque Canyon. I picked it because that's where I live. And this is Shadoni. To understand where the water is going to go, where this effluent coming out of the leach field is going to go, you need to look at the water gradients at Bishops Lodge and those 2 down gradient locations. At Bishops Lodge, the soil level at the leach field is 7,115 feet. If you take the average of the 8 to 12 foot water table during the snow melt, water table is 10 feet below that at 7,105 feet. And during the dry season, it's at 7,092. That's where the water level is at Bishops Lodge. Now let's go downstream and see what it looks like. This is the natural water gradient, just the gradient created by gravity as it pulls water through the ground to ever lower elevations. At Bishops Lodge, they start out at 7,115 feet, and the groundwater is at 7,103. You come down to Big Tesuque Canyon, the elevation of the ground is 6,060 to 6,070 feet. The ground is over 100 feet below the water level at Bishops Lodge. And if you go down to Shadoni, the ground is 6,832 feet. It's over 200 feet lower than the ground is over 200 feet lower than Bishops Lodge water table. And all of that water, all of that, you've got all of the volume of water in the mountains above Bishops Lodge, on the hills on which Bishops Lodge and the hills and villas sit, of the surrounding ravine. All of that is pushing, pressuring the water down to the lower gradient. The natural gradient is pushing that water and it's moving down. Depending on the transmissivity of the soils and the pressure, determines how fast that gradient moves. We need a hydrogeologist to tell us that. Might be a year, might be 10 years. It's probably more likely a year. But that's only the natural gradient. All of those wells you saw, they're pumping water out. They're taking these water levels down. They are increasing the differential, the gradient differential. Bishops Lodge is pumping 3,000 gallons a day into their leach field. Everybody else down below is pumping water out of their wells. And that differential is making this an even steeper and faster gradient for groundwater flow. Has anybody looked at this and analyzed what the effect of that's going to be and how long before the effluent from the leach field arrives in your well? No. So where will the lodge's effluent go? Right down Bishops Lodge Road, impacting hundreds of groundwater wells. That's where it's going to go. But wait, what am I worried about? Isn't the lodge's effluent treated before discharge? I mean, come on. This water is, as I think one bureaucrat at MED said, this treatment plant is like a Ferrari. We should be thankful they're doing this. Well, yeah, the effluent is partially treated before discharge, but it's treated to remove only a subset of specific contaminants. This is how you game the regulations. You figure out what contaminants NMD regulates, and you design your treatment plant to remove those. Everything else just goes through. And the lodge's treatment plant, as they've admitted, cannot remove pharmaceutical waste, volatile organics, PFAs, heavy metals, anything else in that waste stream other than the specific contaminants NMD tells them to remove, they don't remove. And they all go through the treatment plant, and they're all going into the leach field. Moreover, nothing prevents or restricts the lodge, its guests, or its residents from disposing of such contaminants in the lodge's waste stream. Who's going to stop Mildred or Bernie from throwing away their pharmaceuticals in the toilet? And who's going to stop Eddie in the garage from dumping the volatile organics down the drain? Nothing requires the lodge to test for or remove such contaminants before discharge. So they just put them in the leach field, take them out of the treatment, take their effluent from the treatment plant, put it in the leach field. They never test for any of these other contaminants that they're not required to remove. So we have no idea what's in this effluent stream. It's going to be up to us to figure that out, and we're only going to find out when it comes out of our faucet. So this is a little diagram I prepared to illustrate what partial treatment means. You have a waste stream that is contaminated with these three different contaminants, and you design your filtration system to take out one of the contaminants. And no matter how good you are, whether you are good or not at taking that contaminant out, you don't take out any of the other contaminants because you're not designed to, and it doesn't happen. They just pass right through. And do you test for whether these are there? No, no one wants to know. Get it into the leach field as fast as you can. So, in my opinion, I believe the lodge's leach field threatens potentially hundreds of wells. And how fast? How, in what direction? Where in particular? Over what time period? Nobody knows, because nobody's bothered to look. The lodge's new disposal plan is effectively as bad, if not worse, than its original plan. They're not dumping it right in the river. They're putting it in a leach field on the river. Discharging 30,000 gallons per day of partially treated sewage into a 50 by 50-foot leach field is a very bad idea, as I tried to point out, just on the water balance. Forget about the downstream wells. Forget about the underlying aquifer. That much water going into that size of a leach field collected from that many people is going to fail. And the question is it going to fail this year, next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? It's going to fail. Positioning that leach field in a riparian flood zone on alluvial soils that are only 8 to 12 feet above groundwater virtually ensures contamination of the adjacent creek and underlying aquifer. This is why you don't need to be a hydrogeologist to know this, but boy, it sure helps if you are. Doing so immediately up gradient of hundreds of drinking wells is not just reckless, it's utterly indifferent to the health, the safety, and the well-being of every downstream neighbor. They could care less. And it imposes on all of the downstream neighbors the unending burden and cost to protect themselves from the lodge's indifference and greed. You're the ones that are going to have to test your wells, filter your wells, determine whether or not your aquifer is contaminated. And if you want to do anything about it, you're going to have to incur the cost to fix it or sue them to clean it up. And they will be long gone, if not bankrupt by then. So what this is all about, and we have a limited time to act, but we can act and we can stop this, is who bears the risk? What Bishop Lodge is trying to do is to offload the risk of any contamination, the uncertainty and cost of detecting it, and the ongoing burden of dealing with it to all of its downstream neighbors. That's why that leach field is at the downstream edge of its property. Doesn't affect its water outtake from the stream. It's not going to affect its wells. Its residents are all ensconced hundreds of feet in elevation above this. It's going to affect everybody downstream. Contamination may or may not be detected before it reaches our drinking wells and faucets. The fact that you put in a monitoring well here or a monitoring well there doesn't mean that you have detected the spread of the plume. And this, again, is why you need a hydrogeologist to explain to you how poor monitoring can be to capture the flow, especially in an area where you've got highly transmissive soils like this and an awful lot of pumping going on from hundreds of wells. The cost of fixing any contamination after it gets into the leach field is going to be astronomical. Far more than the cost of changing course, putting the leach field somewhere else, or adopting an even far more environmentally sound solution. So I ask you, isn't it far cheaper and safer for Bishop's Lodge to move its leach field rather than stick us, all of us, with its risk? You have until Monday, October 21st, to submit comments to NMED. Be sure, please, to ask for a public hearing. That should be the first item in your request, your comment. Please give us a public hearing. It's in the public interest to stop this leach field from going in and to protect the quality of the aquifer and our drinking water supplies. The website, Protect Tesuque, sent out an email 2 days ago that has a link to the NMED website where they have an automated system where you put in your name, your information, and you can either upload a written set of comments or you can type your comments in here. There's a link. You can do this tonight. You can do it tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. Doesn't take more than 15 minutes at the most to get through this and put in your comments. and then press send, and you're done. Your comments are in. So please either go to the Protect Tesuque website where you can get links, or use the link that was in the email that we sent out. We also sent out and have on our website a template. If you want to just crib it and send that in, fine. There, you can personalize it. There are suggested points. You can just pick these up and either rewrite them or think about them, or pick the ones that apply to you or you think are important. There are 10 points there for your consideration to add and to personalize the comments, but be sure to ask for a public hearing. That's number 10 on the list, but it should be number 1. And then the last thing I want to just talk about very briefly is, I said there were 3 objectives, and we've spent all this time talking about Bishops Lodge, but where's the county? Why is the county allowing this leach field to go in? How come there is not some set of regulations in this county regulating development projects like this, ensuring that when someone puts together a private community of 1,000 residents and aggregates all their waste and then chooses where and how to dispose of that in a leach field that can impact and contaminate the wells of hundreds of downstream neighbors, where's the county? So we've written to the county, and you'll be surprised to, or perhaps not, to learn that there is no regulation in the county on what a private entity like Bishops Lodge can do if they choose not to connect to a municipal treatment plant. If they don't connect to a municipal treatment plant, the county regulations stop. And as far as the county is concerned, you can do whatever the hell you want and can get away with. And that's got to stop. If we're going to protect the ecosystem in this valley, if we're going to maintain the quality of our water supplies, if we are going to continue to rely upon drinking wells as a source of potable water and even agricultural water for the fruits and vegetables and produce that we eat, we need to get the county to step up and accept responsibility for appropriately protecting the groundwater basin, the watershed, the riparian corridors. They need an appropriate set of regulations that are geared to protect the quality of our water and the viability, sustainability of our watershed and ecosystem. So that's everything I had, and I'll turn it back to Eric. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rusty. I think, as we mentioned, for those who came in later, put your questions in the chat. With a group this large, we've got to kind of do it in an orderly fashion. So I'm going to go back to the start of this. And I think everybody got in. There was some concern that some people weren't being admitted, but generally within a minute or two, they I think have gotten in. There are a couple links there. See my question at the top of the chat. Okay, wait a minute. Question, Karen, isn't it likely that wells of residents on the hills and the villas will have their water affected as the water moves through the aquifer? Perhaps the gravity flow dominates, but still. Rusty, do you think does it go
I think
up?
that's why we need to hire a hydrogeologist. If you want a competent, reliable assessment of that, you need somebody that's competent to do it. And we don't have that person.
And that's what we'll be raising the funds for, et cetera. There's a question, Bernadette asked, will the Zoom town hall be recorded? It is being recorded. It'll be on the Protect Tesuque website. People can get it there, download it there, and will be posted there. Mark asked, they were going to only dump into Tesuque Creek during the winter months and the rest of the year on their property, water trees, plants, etc. Are they only going to use the leach field during the winter months?
So what their application has said is they're going to use the leach field for 7 months a year. And how long it'll be 7 months and when they go back to revise it, who knows? It was first going to be 2 months a year, then 4 months a year, but the application to NMD says 7 months a year.
Okay. And when the Bishops Lodge leach field failed, didn't they cart their waste away with a truck, you know, the trucking and what they've been doing?
Well, what they, and there was a problem with disposal of the solid waste from Bishop's Lodge on Poake, Pueblo. I don't know when that occurred. I don't know when that, how that relates to the failure of their leach field. They've had a longstanding problem with disposal of their waste stream. Recently, they've been hiring Brian, who we all got to know out on the street, waved, honked, cheered the 3 times an hour that he drove by hauling off their waste. Right now, whether they are disposing or not, I don't know. I don't know what their deal is with the county. I don't know what their deal is with NMED.
Maybe residents of the hills and villas need to be recruited to understand concerns that could affect them too. Probably a good idea there. I've heard it talking with others that we should also ask at the appropriate point, these problems not be dealt with as exceptions by NMED. What do you think of? Not sure by exceptions. It might mean the conditions where they have an exception if they.
Well, I'll state a very strong opinion as clearly as I can. The only objective here from Protect Tesuque's perspective should, in my opinion, be either relocate the leach field to a location that is demonstrably safe and will not contaminate either the creek or the aquifers, which I think is a stretch to think that they can do that, or come up with an environmentally sound solution. And some of our advisors are advocating redoing their treatment plan to generate potable water. Some are advocating sell the water. If the water is so good, sell it. Some are advocating deep injection. Inject the effluent in very deep wells below the aquifer. Some are suggesting, no, connect to the municipal sewer system. You already pump your water uphill to your storage tank, pump your effluent uphill to the treatment plant. So there are multiple alternatives available to the lodge. The only impediment to implementing any of them is cost.
Kathy asked, is the leach field lined? Do you know?
To my knowledge, it's not lined, but it would be a bad idea to line it because you can't, in a contained space that is no more than 30,000 cubic feet, continue to dump 30,000 gallons of water. It overflows real fast.
They would have their new swimming pool. Okay.
Yeah.
Has Bishop Lodge been contacted about these current concerns with the leach field and plan? If so, what was their response?
I haven't contacted them.
I had been in contact with them prior to this, but we have actually just put this together in like in the last week when we had a meeting and a steering committee meeting with one person who gave us some feedback, and then all this research Rusty's been doing. Certainly they should be contacted, in my opinion, to at least say, will you move your leach field, which I suspect I know the answer. I've not seen any septic trucks entering or leaving the Bishops Lodge property lately. I believe they got a temporary permit to discharge into their vegetation to water. And that's why I don't think they've been pumping out. When the Bishop's Lodge leach field failed, yeah, they carted it away. Question, when I calculated thinking it was all year long, it looked like they were going to dump 13.71 tons a year. Does that seem right? If so, don't we want to remind them of what happened to Flint, Michigan, how much it cost when people got sick, what would happen if kids downstream got sick, how much it'll cost them in damages?
Yeah, we had, when they were proposing to go forward with with discharging directly into the creek, we were organizing to make that point very clear to them. And they pivoted before we did that. We did not hire an attorney. We were prepared to. We did not do the fundraising that was required to hire an attorney and the appropriate technical resources we were gearing up to, and they pivoted. And I think there was some period of false euphoria over their pivot there was no clarity on what their alternative plan was until NMED came out with their draft permit. That's when they began to release the information. This was very much like the EPA MPDES permit. A lot of rumors, but no clear information about what they were doing. It became clear when the NMED application, when the NMED permit went out for comment, they then gave access to the application, and it became clear what they were doing, where this leach field was, and what a disaster it was. We've known that and have been digging into its implications and consequences for the last 8 to 10 days.
Okay. And then there are some questions on check here. There's some questions on signs. That's a little more strategy. I guess I would just like to state that we could say no one from that we're aware of at all from Protect Tesuque removed a sign or told someone to remove their signs. And the committee was very clear that this was going to be a personal choice of people. And it sounds like as we move into a hearing and such, we may need to gear signs toward the message that we're dealing with now with the leach field. So I'm sure the groups will get together and talk about that. Has Justin Green retreated from the conversation? Rusty?
No, I don't think so. I think we haven't gotten a response to the letter, but that's not an easy letter to respond to. So I think he's he was at the TCBA or the TVCA picnic Sunday. He's working the crowd. I think we'll see if he retreats or not. That's partly why the letter was sent, was to make it very clear what questions need to be addressed and answered, and hopefully get answers to those questions, or hold our elected officials who refuse to answer them accountable.
And if everyone would send him a recording link to this meeting, it might be helpful too. Nancy had a question about, has not the water in the original 2 leach fields already contaminated the aquifer, or was the effluent in them far less than the proposed 30,000 per day now?
I'm sorry, I blanked on that. Was that a
Has the water in the original two leach fields already contaminated the aquifer? Or was the effluent far less than the proposed 30,000 per day? They claim they're doing about 12,000 is what they say now, but.
the I mean, one of the truths that we need to confront here is we don't know. Nobody's looked. We don't know if those leach fields are an active source of contamination and what, if anything, they're doing to the aquifer. And or what, if anything, they will do if 30,000 gallons of water is dumped immediately next to them. I mean, this is, you know, a lack of, for want of looking, we don't know. And until we acknowledge that and recognize the implications of that and why that is not a good strategy for us going forward, and hold our county accountable, hold our state accountable, demand that these resources be respected and protected, nothing's going to change.
Which is a good lead into Kathy's question. What additional protection would the county offer beyond needs supposed coming from NMED? What do you see the county, how they could get involved then to look at these things? What regulations are needed or such?
Well, I think certainly, you know, for starters, if you, I mean, fortunately for us, Bishops Lodge presents an easy case. This is not a difficult case. You've got a large resort developer who is aggregating the waste of 1,000+ people. That is, for all practical purposes, a municipality. It needs to be treated and regulated like that. You don't get away with dumping sewage and waste from 1,000 people into the equivalent of a residential septic field and walk away. And the county, in its countywide development regulations, could address this, but it doesn't. There's nothing in the ordinance about this. So there's nothing that requires any environmental assessment. There's no required soils testing. There's no required hydrogeology. The county hasn't required any of that. You can just, you know, go down and get your permit and put in your leach field, and everybody else downhill suffers the consequences. And that's just not a sound way to govern. If you go back and look at that picture from the Office of State Engineer of all the wells that are in this valley and all the people that are relying and depending upon those wells, you need to understand how vulnerable and hazard it is to turn a blind eye to sources of contamination for those wells.
Is the letter to the commission available for others to send as well? If not, okay, is a copy available? We'll post that on the Protect Tesuque site, right? Is there other people can incorporate those ideas or ask for things from the county? I don't see that as cross. That would be good.
Yeah, I'd hoped it was on the site.
And it might be, I don't know if Michael is on or someone knows, but this is a letter from Protect Tesuque to the county commissioners through Justin Green. Someone asked what that is. When the Bishops Lodge leach field, that's like a tongue twister, failed, didn't they cart their waste away with a truck? We said that. Isn't it in the interest of Bishops Lodge to avoid multi-millions in lawsuit damages when someone is hospitalized or dies? Is there a size of leach field that is appropriate for what they're doing?
Let me take the lawsuit one, and because I think it's important for us to talk about what do we need to hire a lawyer for. We don't need to hire a lawyer to bring class action personal injury suit. We can't prove our damages. And this is part of what I'm talking about when I say the Bishops Lodge is trying to shift onto us the burden of proving damages, proving that we're harmed. Because for us to prove that we're harmed, we have to establish causation. We have to get a hydrogeologist, and we've got to do all of the testing. We've got to do all of the monitoring we have to do. And that is extraordinarily expensive and time consuming. And you have to be doing it in the right place and the right way to catch it. And that is very difficult to learn. That's a long learning curve. That's also costly. And it might not manifest for 10 or 15 years. And in the meantime, Bishop's Lodge is gone. They won't be doing anything. That's why the time to act is right now. And what we need to do is we need to retain a competent local environmental lawyer who is well connected in the state, that we had lined up and were prepared to hire in order to handle the discharge permit. We need to go forward, pull the trigger on that. And he needs to bring in the appropriately competent resources, the hydrogeologists, the engineers, the soils engineers to look at this. And we need to fight this NMED permit. Now, that's the expensive way to do this. There are other ways to do this. In addition to that, protest. That's one. Media outreach. That's another. And perhaps most importantly, reach the governor. The governor doesn't live far away. The governor has a local and immediate understanding of what this is all about. And some of our advisors are strongly urging us to open up the channels of communication and contact with the governor, because apparently NMED isn't getting the message. And this is not a favorable situation for the governor. If this becomes the governor's problem, then it's going to hurt.
Is there a size of leach field appropriate for what they're doing? That's what we need these people to tell us, but it doesn't sound like a leach field, and particularly in that location, is a solution, right? Is that fair?
Well, it's certainly not in that location. And it's certainly a bad choice in general for a small municipality like Bishop's Lodge to aggregate the waste into a leach field. That is just not if you're going down your list of workable, long-term, fail-safe, environmentally sound approaches to dealing with your waste stream, that's at the bottom of the list, not the top.
Jamie writes, Painter, I strongly recommend dealing directly with the county manager. The commissioners, in my experience, have very little clout in the county matters of consequence. Consider retaining Catherine Miller, prior county manager, very competent as a consultant. Thank you for that suggestion. Great. And actually forwarding the letter to the county manager while Justin, reviews it is probably a really good idea.
Yep.
Colin points out an Olympic-sized pool is 490,000 gallons. At 30,000 gallons per day, that's 2 pools per month in that 50 by 50 spot. Last night, someone reported they had a conversation with Justin. He says, they did what we asked, no more discharge. What more concerns do we have? So he needs to watch this presentation. Is it an election year? Is he paying attention? Is asked. I just looked at a sample ballot. He's not on it. There should be moratorium on further construction on this property till wastewater is dealt with. And I think that these are the kind of things till that's resolved. The things that as an organization, as a group, we've got to be looking at our priorities. We need to be seeking state water quality standards. Do you know on those, Rusty, anything about
I'm a
Uh,
5-month
legislate-
resident. I'm a 5-month resident of New Mexico, and I'm a retired lawyer. I don't practice, and I have no ambition to learn New Mexico law. So no, the answer from my perspective is start local. Moving the state, unless you have and some of our advisors are strongly urging us to reach out to the governor and providing pathways to do that. And I think that's good advice. But trying to move an entity like NMED to adopt regulations and then get them through and then get them, that you're talking years. And it's a Herculean task. Start local. We have a county government that is our local government. Hold them accountable to protect our local ecosystem. They aren't doing it.
Yeah, and hopefully there's a group on the call or other people working on other things. Like someone mentioned here, Mark mentioned legislation for a stronger NMED. If you read in the paper this morning or yesterday about PFAS, and there's going to be legislation about that, and people talking about the wells in La Cienega or wherever, that became, let's look at ways that we could get a core group of people and lobbyists and our lawyer involved in some of those issues down the line. Question, when they began over the summer, there was reportedly an anonymous sponsor who said they'd cover legal expenses. Is that person still in support of that? Rusty is...
Well, I perhaps know the most about this, which is I was never aware of anyone. No one ever said to me they would cover legal expenses. I am aware of many people in the community who have offered to donate. So someone started a rumor, and to my chagrin, it seemed that kind of spiked the enthusiasm. If we're going to, I'll be blunt. I was a trial lawyer for 35 years, and that's what I did. I did trial law. And contested battles like this are, my bread and butter. This is what I did for 35 years. I no longer do it. I don't want to do it. I've had enough. Retired. However, if you had come to me in California to take this on, this would have, easily cost $250,000, easily, to contest this. Now, in New Mexico, it's not as expensive, but this is not going to be cheap. If our community is going to get serious about stepping up and stopping this, as a legal matter, it's going to be expensive. As a technical matter, it's going to be expensive. And we need to understand what is and is not an environmentally sound solution. And that means we need both legal and technical advice. And we need to pay for it. And to pay for it, we need to raise the money. People need to open their pocketbooks and recognize you're investing in protecting your water quality on which you depend, your drinking water and your domestic supply and the quality of life here and the ecosystem you live in. And if you want to protect that, you're going to have to donate. And if we do it collectively, if we do it together, which is why we formed this corporation to provide a tax deductible means for people to do that so that we could pool our common interests. We all share the same interest here. We all have a common, immediate and very vital interest in protecting this water. Let's come together and make that happen.
Okay, and more comments about what Justin Green said. These are the kind of things that the lodge does say. They did what was requested, no discharge, build the leach field. They're going to clean the water before they put in the leach field. Their solution is much cleaner than every neighbor's septic system and leach field. Free field to discuss, but I was worried the neighbors were going to move the goalposts. Well, we haven't really moved the goalposts. We've always said it should be environmentally sound, and their placement of the leach field was their choice, and it's a problem.
And I think, let's talk about our leach fields, because we all have leach fields. That's true. And leach fields are not the best solution to disposing of your waste. That's true. But look at the scale of our leach fields. And this is something that went right over the head of NMED. I mean, they just didn't appreciate, in my opinion, they don't appreciate. What we're talking about is the aggregation of the weight of a waste stream from 1,000 people, generating 30,000 gallons a day of effluent, getting dumped on a 50 by 50 foot leach field. That is an extraordinary concentration, aggregation, and acceleration of risk. So at least assess it, understand it, and put it in a safe place if you're going to do it. It's not in a safe place. It's in absolutely the worst possible place it could be. So can't we just apply a little bit of common sense here and make sound decisions?
And they started building before they had the permit. They had a permit to build, but not to dump. There is a question about, shouldn't we, I don't know why we'd wait to have open dialogue with the governor. If it's more widely known and understood, there could be harm to property sooner than later. I don't think anybody's waiting, and I think that's in process. We want to get the people who have the best connections to get the personal contact going, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that thinks that they have an avenue to the governor or some way of reaching the governor, speak up or do it. I mean, nothing's holding anybody back.
Yeah.
And we want it to be effective. That's what we want. We don't want it to be ineffective. We want it to be effective. And we want it to be sure that it achieves the objective that we all share in common.
Okay. Are any of the pueblos affected by this situation? They were potentially affected by dumping, but not necessarily contamination of our aquifer? Is that?
I mean, they're just as affected as they were by dumping. The only possible difference between the aquifer and dumping is the rate at which contamination and the spread, the ultimate spread of the contamination. But I believe the Pueblo is, when push comes to shove, they are not going to be, look, let's be clear and honest. I think they probably have as much interest in making Bishops Lodge an issue as they do, and then turning around and making an issue for all of us. Yeah, we want Bishops Lodge to clean up, and we also want everyone in Tesuque to clean up too. And you know, frankly, we have to do something about that. We've got to come to grips with this. That we are living. Go back and look at that map of the wells in Tesuque. Look at the distribution of those wells. All those wells are pumping. They're all creating a downward gradient in the water table. They're pulling water to those wells, and that is moving water through the ground. So we all have a responsibility to one another to make sure our septic systems are safe, and if they're not safe, to remove them or replace them or turn to an alternative.
There's a question if someone has done a budget for what the numbers should be, legal, hydro, et cetera. I think we're working on that. Anything you want to say on that, Rusty?
No, I think I think my opinion, and I mean, okay, I'm a lawyer. I did this for many years. My opinion is the best way to get a budget is to hire Tom Finasco, because he has the resources. He knows what we need, and he knows who the people are to do this. We can go reinvent the wheel, or we can find a pro who does this for a living, knows what he's doing, and has done it before to help us, and is connected in ways that none of us are to help make it happen.
Okay. Jamie asked, is the website donation link ready to go? It's ready to go. You can go to Protect Tesuque and click on donate. If everyone on this call puts money in, there could be thousands of dollars in there tomorrow. So I urge you to do that, but that wasn't the intent of this call.
No, and let's be real clear. The intent of this call is to please get your comments in.
Comments and give you a basis.
Yes.
To
ask for a hearing, understand that it's important that your comments frame a basis for stopping this permit. That we are trying to, we're late in the game here. We have not hired Tom Nasco. We believe that we're in a position to do so. We've got hopefully more news to communicate shortly about donors and funding and matches. That's to come. We're not yet ready to talk about that publicly, but hopefully we can do that very shortly. And put the money in place and move this ball forward. But in the meantime, Monday's a real deadline. And everybody needs to take the time to do their comments. You need to think about framing the comment in a way that convinces NMAD to first grant a hearing, but then to also deny the permit. Yeah, this is stupid. This is very poorly situated in the most hazardous place it could be, immediately adjacent to both the aquifer and the creek, immediately upgradient of hundreds of wells. How could anybody possibly think that's a good idea, except the lodge?
Okay, I think we're through. We got lots of people saying, thank you, Rusty. A lot of quotes of really, really fine job to put a lot of this into perspective for the next steps, and stay active, stay involved, and get the comments in, and then we'll regroup certainly after that. So those are due Monday. Share this presentation wide and far, and it's mentioned Tom Nasco is an attorney. His bio is linked on the Protect Tesuque website in the last newsletter if you click on his name. So thank you, and we will upload this shortly.
And thank you all for coming. I mean, this is really important, and this is what makes Tesuque shine, when people come together and collaborate so constructively. And that showed in the last go around, and now, we need even more people to come out, and makes it a pleasure to live here. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Right.